Okay, how about a flyer? Flyer? Okay, how about somebody pitched in your class? Okay. Any, a tweet? Facebook? Shop? Facebook? Okay. The rest of y'all are probably members or word of mouth or from friends. Yeah, okay. Word of mouth always the best marketing tool. So I'm just going to make a few announcements before our very honorable guest comes and speaks to us today. So next week there's no meeting. We're having a social, so everybody's invited to come. The address is right here. It's not going to be here in McCoy, so everybody's invited. We're going to have a social and then a little party afterwards. I won't disclose any of the details yet though. Also, we've got quad sales this week and next week, so if you're interested in helping out with our business BOCO tees, the sign-up sheet is right over here on your way out. Feel free to sign up. We do have a special little promotion going on today for CEO. If you're not yet a member of CEO and you like what you hear today, you can join for $10 today. You'll get this meeting, the social next week, another speaker meeting, and then our last meeting of the semester. So $10 gets you affiliated with the Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization at a national level. So I think that's it for all of my announcements, I think. And I'd like to turn the floor over to Amanda Hebner, who's our VP of Programming.
Like Phoebe said, my name is Amanda Hebner. I'm the Vice President of Programming for CEO. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Gary Hoover. I apologize, I'm going to try and cut this down, but there's so many great things that he has accomplished. Gary Hoover began his entrepreneurial journey at an early age. He grew up in Anderson, Indiana, at General Motors factory town, and began asking questions about business at an early age. Convinced that the best way to change the world was to lead or create enterprises, he started subscribing to Fortune magazine when he was 12 years old. As a part of his education, he studied economics at the University of Chicago under Milton Friedman and 2 other Nobel Prize winners. He served as a securities and analysis for Citibank on Wall Street, worked as a buyer for Federated Department Stores, and headed up acquisitions and strategic planning for the May Department Stores Company. At the age of 30, he finally took the plunge and started Superstore Bookstop, and the company was sold to Barnes & Noble for $41.5 million. After he and his partners sold Bookstop, he started a small business information publisher, the Reference Press, which is now known as, it's Hoover's, that is Hoover's now.
Hoovers.com.
Hoovers.com, okay, which is the largest internet-based provider of information about enterprises, and which was sold in 2003 by Dun & Bradstreet for $117 million. And today, Gary Hoover travels the world speaking to Fortune 500 executives, trade association entrepreneurs, and college students. So if you guys could please help me welcome you, Gary.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I just started my 5th company. If you'll take one of these and pass those down, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I just started my 5th company, and my 4th one was going to be here in San Marcos. So I'm very fond of this school and this town. Actually, I do a lot of demographic and geographic projections related to a lot of the businesses I do. And my number is that in 2050, Boston and San Antonio will have grown together and reach 7.2 million people and passed up Philadelphia to become the 11th biggest metropolitan area in the country. When that happens, not if, when that happens, and I have confidence in your projections, San Marcos and New Braunfels will be the center of everything. So, if you really follow that out, and I really believe in thinking as far out into the future as possible, this place is, you think it's changed now, man, give it another 20 or 30 years. And I really, I have little tablets in my pocket. This is tablet number 205, and in there I have about 225 ideas for business. And one of them relates to a way that would allow people to invest in cities. So you could go long, like investing long in San Marcos and New Braunfels, and I think that would be one of the best investments somebody could make. But I also know a lot of you will go off to Dallas or Houston or New York or wherever you go. So how many of you want to be entrepreneurs? Woo! All right, good, good. It's so frustrating. I go back to my hometown, Anderson, Indiana. I was up there speaking to high school classes a couple of weeks ago, and college and everybody else. And I was speaking to the Entrepreneurs Club at the local university in my hometown. It's a small university with maybe 3,000 students. And I spoke to the Entrepreneurs Club, and at the end of it I asked them, how many of you want to be entrepreneurs? And one hand went up out of like 40. And so, well, this is the Entrepreneurs Club. What's going on? What are you going to do? And they all wanted to go to law school and all this. And thinking about it, because back there they're really trying to encourage entrepreneurship, where they think they are. And yet, this is a whole different environment. And it's a smaller city in Indiana. The capital, Indianapolis, would be a little more energetic. But nevertheless, it's no smaller than San Marcos. And what's going on, people ask me, why is that? And I really believe part of it, especially here in Central Texas, is the celebration of entrepreneurship. And in Austin, I really attribute a lot of it to Michael Dell. I started my business a year before he started his, my first one. I picked Austin as the best place in America to start it 40 years ago this year. 40, no, 30, not quite that old. Anyway, you know, every kid in Austin knows, well, I could become a pro football, I could be Drew Brees, you know, I could be an actor, I could be Sandra Bullock, right? Guess you couldn't both be Drew Brees and Sandra Bullock. Maybe in this day and age. I could be Michael Dell. I could be, you know, drop out of college and become a billionaire. So it's kind of like on the radar, whereas in Anderson, Indiana, it just ain't on the radar. If people think entrepreneurship, they think, well, I'll take over Dad's State Farm agency, which I'm not knocking. That's a wonderful thing to do. I'm a State Farm customer. But there's another world out there, and the idea of really building something significant that's going to make a difference. Everything. Those of you who came in later, I have cards here. You can grab one at the end. I'll leave here. There's some here. I've always got more. So let me see that all that biography stuff. I mean, the real story is, I grew up in this General Motors factory town, Anderson, Indiana, and all my, and GM was kind of like life itself. Anderson had 60,000 people living there then, and 27,000 worked at General Motors. It was 7 million square feet of factory buildings. And it seemed like it was everything in that town. Everybody either worked for GM or worked for a supplier at General Motors. And I'm sitting there in the classroom, and the teachers are talking history, they're talking U.S. history, they're talking European history, and they're talking about, oh, this Civil War general did this, and this general did that, and this one won, and this one lost. So which strategies work? They're talking about presidents and how they got their agendas through Congress, you know, what kind of leadership styles they had. They're talking about kings and queens and how they made decisions, what their decision-making styles were. All these things really about leadership and management. And I said, this is really cool stuff. I like learning this. And then I held up my hand, but what can you tell me about General Motors? Because it was so important in that town. And they said, oh, they make Chevrolet, Pontiac, Buick, Oldsmobile, Cadillac, GMC truck, refrigerators. I said, no, I know all that. I said, who started it? Why did they start it? Who runs it today? Are they smart people or stupid people? Sometimes we think anybody who runs a great big company's got to be smart. But if you look at the almost death of AIG and of Citibank and Bank America, it's pretty clear they aren't real smart. Now, they may have high IQs, and they may have all kinds of degrees. Most of those people who destroyed those companies went to the finest business schools in America, went to Stanford and Harvard and all that stuff. The guys that destroyed Enron, they were the top of their class at Harvard Business School. So that's a different kind of smart from real smart, you know. You might have the same in one person. Bill Gates went to Harvard, and he's really smart, you know, but he dropped out. So they aren't necessarily really that smart if they run a big company. And I want to know, are these guys running General Motors? How are they going to react to this new product coming in from Japan called the Toyo Pet? That was the first Japanese car to come here. That was Toyota's first model. And I think they laughed at it and said, oh, nobody's ever going to buy one. I wanted to understand GM and how it worked and how its leaders thought. And nobody could answer my question. So I was in a newsstand with my family, and my sister was buying and looking at the horse and dog magazines. My big brother was looking at airplane car magazines. And I see one called Fortune magazine, the big business magazine. And every spring or early summer, they do a list of the 500 biggest companies in America. And that issue had just come out, and I opened it up, and there, the biggest company in the world was General Motors. 50% bigger than any other company on earth. Really the greatest company in America, or the world at that time. and more profitable than any company. And not only did that magazine talk about General Motors and their leaders and what made it a great company, but it had 499 other companies listed. And I'm like, oh, shit, man, this is so cool. I guess I probably would say, holy shit, at that age in Indiana, would have been in deep shit. But anyway, I said whatever I said. And I ran to my parents and said, you got to get me a subscription to this magazine. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And they're like, oh, you weird kid. You know, what's wrong with you? You know, why don't you go play basketball like a normal Indiana kid? Anyway, I got my subscription, and 2 months later, I entered the 7th grade. So I became a business junkie at the age of 12, and when the new Fortune 500 came out this spring, it was the 49th year in a row that I grabbed it out of my mailbox and went down through all 500 companies to see who's up and who's down and what makes her winners and losers. And as I've gone on through life, I worked for 3 great big Fortune 500 type companies. I've done, just started my 5th startup. You know, I had 3 little ones I did in college, kind of practice. When Hoover's went public in 1999, we were listed on the stock exchange. 3 of the board members, we had started our first company together in our college dorm 29 years earlier. So one of my lessons is when you meet smart people, keep their phone numbers, you know, stay in touch. And I just spent this last weekend with one of those same guys. So however many years, we started our first company in 1970, so whatever that works out to, 42 years. And here we are starting another one. As you go through life, especially if you go through failures, and I lost all my money on my 3rd one, I can talk about all my experiences to the extent you want. I tell you, the 2 things that are the most important in surviving all that, I believe, are a sense of humor and good friends. So if you don't have those, you're pretty well sunk. And if you are a real entrepreneur, you are going to fail. And in many ways, fail a lot, and fail often. In fact, it's a good thing in some ways. But as I've gone through life, not just studying big companies, because at first I was really into big business, but as I observed it, I realized, well, it might be fun just to start one of these things. And that, by the time I was 30, decided to go the entrepreneurial route. But also studying enterprises in general. And I define an enterprise as any time you've got a group of people who have a common vision, who have shared goals. And I actually believe that of all the corporations that have touched my life, which has been a lot that I've worked for and started and everything else, really the most successful is the University of Chicago that Amanda mentioned. That was a crazy, radical entrepreneur, an education entrepreneur, a nonprofit entrepreneur named William Harper. And in the 1890s, he dreamed up the idea of let's create a great university from scratch. And he's like 300 years behind Harvard and all those guys. He convinced old John Rockefeller, really the father of the oil industry, to put up the money. They built it on the south side of Chicago, which was a real, it was a boom town, but it was not very polished. It was not where you would think you could ever have a decent university. And now that university is over 100 years old. It's still younger than most of those other guys. And yet it's had more Nobel Prize winning teachers and students than any other university on earth. And it's really been blessed to have great leadership, great consistent leadership. Even I'm the entrepreneur in residence at the School of Information at UT Austin. And 3 years ago, I was the entrepreneur in residence at the McCombs Business School there. But here we are in Texas with such a strong economy, and they've laid off people, whereas the University of Chicago, in a much weaker economy, hasn't laid off a single person. And it really, when I asked the people there, before I lost all my money, I gave them a dormitory. So I figured no matter how much money I lose, I always have a place to sleep, right? But I asked him, why is it? And talked to the head of the Board of Trustees. He said, our only goal as trustees is to ensure this place is here 100 years from now. That's all we are focused on. We aren't here to run it day to day, and we're here to make sure it's here. So any enterprise, I don't care if it's a small enterprise, a big enterprise, I don't care what industry it's in, I don't care if it's for-profit or not-for-profit, the blessing of having great visionary leadership is a blessing. So anyhow, so I'm interested in all that. And I have a thing, I wrote a book, I have a blog, I have a video blog, all that's on the front of the card. You can always email me. I tell all my students, I've taught a lot of classes, and I tell all my students, you get free lifetime 24/7 email support. Now that's in my lifetime, not your lifetime. I'm not coming back from the dead to answer questions. But while I'm still kicking, you can always email me. The longer talk and everything is on the back of the card, which is one reason I passed these out. Those are the 8 things that I think are really the keys to building and leading successful enterprises. And I'm thinking tonight maybe, I'm not going to do all 8, I don't think. I can always get into that, and I want to have time to, discuss the Q&A, whatever works for you guys. The first thing on that list that I think is the most important aspect of entrepreneurial thinking is to have a sense of curiosity, to look around and always be asking questions. And I give a course on my own. I have my own little Hoover Academy. Daniel Frunza talked to your group, right? And he just, we have one more class to go in his round. So he's been through 11 of the sessions. He's a great guy. And I have, the average person who takes my class is probably 40 years old. I've got people who have sold their businesses for millions. I've got MBAs. I've got homemakers. The kids are off to college and they're saying, I think I might start a business with my savings. So it's a very diverse group. But it's really about how do you think like an entrepreneur? Because I believe that entrepreneurial thinking is desperately needed in all aspects of our lives. I believe it is more needed in government and in the nonprofit world even than it is in the business world. The business world by nature is going to get it, right? And I've actually advocated that entrepreneurship classes be taken out of business schools. That it's not about business. It's a view of the world. It's an attitude. It's a way of seeing things and a way of seeing opportunities. So let me step back. What is entrepreneurship? In my mind, there's a million definitions out there. You can find as many as you want. It kind of came to mind because I really believe you always learn from each other. I learn just as much from students as they learn from me, I hope, if everything's working right. That's why the front of my car says learner and teacher, So I'm sitting there, that made me an entrepreneur in residence at the McCombs Business School at UT Austin. And I asked the dean, I said, well, so what's the entrepreneur in residence do? He says, I don't know. What do you think it should do? They've never had one. They now have a new one every year, so they're on the 4th one now. And so we ended up, they gave me an office, they put up signs all over campus, said, if you got an idea for a business, go see Gary. And people started showing up at my office. I think I met one-on-one with about 200 students and student teams to talk about their ideas. And about an hour and a half each. And some of them, they get the 24/7 deal, so I'll get emails till the day I die probably from some of those folks. Anyway, and trying to think, well, what is this all about? They knock on my door, and one of the things that would happen is they come in, and they'd say, I want to see you, Mr. Entrepreneur in Residence. I say, well, why do you want to see me? Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And they'd say, because I want to get rich. When they said that, I'd say, well, you've come to the wrong office. You need to go down the hall somewhere, I don't know where for sure. I mean, the thing is, somebody who says that is looking for a formula, looking for an algorithm, looking for what an economist would call an input-output model. You do A, you do B, you do C, you get D, right? And guys, if that's the way you think, that's not the way entrepreneurship works. All you can really do is find something you love and really throw yourself at it. And the idea that it's this predictability, I mean, guys, even go to law school or med school. I know those are very difficult and you've got to love what you do to succeed. But if you go to a big law school and get good grades and get out and go to work for a big law firm and practice the right kind of law, you're going to live in a big house someday if you want to. I actually tell high school kids, if somebody says, man, I just want to get rich, first of all, I always ask why. Because most people who think they want to get rich have never in their life been asked why. Everybody just assumes, well, everybody wants to get rich. Well, I know a lot of really unhappy rich people, So why do you want to get rich? And really think it through. But if you're still convinced, oh, I just want to get rich, I tell the high school kids, I said, look, set your goal over the next 10, 15 years, whatever, to become the most knowledgeable person about real estate in Lakeway, Texas, or Westlake Hills, Texas, the affluent suburbs of the west side of Austin. I mean, if you really set that as your goal, and you're serious about it, you still got to work hard at it, you still got to love it. But if you really become the most knowledgeable person about all those million, and now there are $3 and $4 million houses out in that part of town, then you're going to live in one of them. I mean, that's what happens to people who are really good in that field. I mean, if you're going to sell houses, you get 6% commission either way. You might as well sell $5 million houses as $100,000 houses. But I guess if you're doing it volume, the other works too. But so it's not, entrepreneurship is not about money. The other thing I'd say is that capital and money is overrated. I was over in Portugal speaking. I spoke at 4 universities in 5 days. I'll be back there next month speaking in Lisbon to students. And everywhere you go, they say, oh, we can't start companies here. You know, there's no venture capital. And I'm like, well, you know, in Austin, Texas, I'm a member of a group called Bootstrap Austin. There's 1,500 of us. They're all starting companies, and almost none of them are raising outside capital. Yeah, at the right stage and the right point in the company's evolution, you need capital or may need capital. But bootstrappers are like using their credit cards. They're getting their customers to pay them early. They're getting their suppliers to let them pay them late. They're using every creative way possible to stretch that money. And I believe there have been just as many companies fail because they're overcapitalized as undercapitalized. I can point time after time, Austin-based companies got venture capital, raised $40 million, and they're bankrupt and closed. And if they raise $5 million, they might still be open. Because when the bigger dollars you raise, the more temptation to have a nice office and to go pay more. And somebody says, well, I can't work for you unless I make $150,000 a year. Instead of saying, well, go screw yourself. I didn't say that. But you know, instead of saying, well, I can't hire you. No, sure. And man, it can kill you just as much as it can help you. I'm not knocking money. I love the money is fine. I really like being rich, and I hope to be again, you know. But it's not the essence. It's not the core of it. The other thing that you see, especially in and around Austin, is an obsession with technology. You know, people would come to my office and with a gadget, they just pick, because I like gadgets too, any gadget, and say, oh, I've invented this thing, and it's going to change the world, and I can't show it to you because you'd steal the idea from me if I showed it to you. And no, nobody's ever going to see it, but boy, if they did, they'd laugh, you know. People, especially computer science, engineering, obsessed in love with their technologies. Technology is irrelevant. Technology is irrelevant except to the extent that it makes somebody's life better. If you study, the greatest technology company ever built in the United States was a company called IBM. And it went through a whole, companies go through an arc. They go through a cycle. And once in a while you got one that endures for a long period of time. John Deere and Procter & Gamble were both founded in 1837. But IBM came really out of about 1915, give or take. By 1993, I think it was, had the biggest corporate loss in U.S. history. But in between, they had this incredible run. And if you look at their success, well, the mainframe computer, you know, the giant computer, that was pioneered. The commercial mainframe computer was pioneered by a company called Univac. Out of Philadelphia. So the company's remnants are still around in Unisys. But anyway, Univac in, I think it was maybe summer of 1953, give or take, they had sold 60% of all the mainframe computers in the world. And I mean, these are like 10 or something, you know, but it was the beginning of the industry, and they owned it, they dominated. And everybody that was in a high-tech company at that point, early 50s, knew that the mainframe would become a big deal. So Raytheon, General Electric, RCA, National Cash Register, all these companies got into the field. Said, oh, we got to be in this. And IBM was in there too. They were just at number 2 to Univac. And all those companies except for one, the decisions were made by technologists. And the people at Univac and all those other companies except IBM said, we need to make a mainframe with a faster CPU, you know, a faster central processor. Because they're like car guys that want to build Ferraris, you know, whereas real car guys, they like Ferraris, but they also love minivans. They understand the kind of the essence of the thing. But so all these computer makers saying, faster CPU, faster computer, more millions of transactions per second, all that jazz. IBM was not run by a technologist. It was run by a salesman, a man named Thomas Watson Sr. It was him and his son, Thomas Watson Jr., took over in the 50s. And old man Watson was a salesman and only a salesman. He had learned from probably the greatest salesman in American history, a guy named John Patterson, built a company called National Cash Register. And now Watson believed in technology. He built a big laboratory and everything, but the essence was selling. And he went and met with all his customers when he's in this mainframe computer business and says, what do you need? And not one of his customers said they needed a faster CPU. Not one of them. They all said the bottleneck is the printer. We got the data in the machine, we can't get the answers out because the printer's not fast enough. So Watson went back to his laboratory and they developed a high-speed printer. And within like 12 months, IBM had 60% of the mainframe market in the US and the world and held it for the next 30 or 40 years. And built one of the most profitable, greatest companies in world history. It was because he was obsessed with his customers. He had a department looking at the future called the Future Demands Department. It wasn't a bunch of scientists trying to figure out what gadget is next. It was a bunch of people asking, what are our customers going to ask us for next year? So he was obsessed with his customers. And you look at Steve Jobs, you know, as that thing began to rise up, he did not have any better scientists than Dell or HP or any of those dudes, right? It wasn't about science. It wasn't about technology. I think you've got to know what's coming next, because you've got to know what are the tools I have to play with and what are my options. And you've got to have scientists around you. But Jobs was about making that thing easier for people to use. Making it better looking. Great design. Something the General Motors guys, actually something the IBM guys understood. So entrepreneurship is not about technology. That is not at the heart of it. And again, I'm not knocking money and I'm not knocking technology. But to think those are what entrepreneurship is all about is a mistake. My definition of entrepreneurship, and this really comes from observing a lot, I think I've probably spoken to 50,000 entrepreneurs, every continent in Antarctica, all over, Jakarta, Manila, all over, and all over the U.S. My conclusion is entrepreneurship is getting great personal satisfaction from serving others. Because it has to be, you have to love it. You really have to be passionate about it, or it isn't going to happen. And it has to work for your customer. And if you got one side and not the other side, it ain't going to work. I mean, at my age, I got a lot of friends who've done a lot of things. I've got friends who've spent their whole life giving, you know, and serving, and a life of public service or whatever, where, oh, I just lay myself down the road, and everything I do is for other people. I never do anything for myself. My entire life is unselfish. Most of those people aren't very happy. They weren't into it. And on the other hand, I know people whose entire lives have been about themselves and how attractive is my spouse and how big is my car and how big is my boat or whatever, and most of those people aren't really happy. The people who are really happy are the people who got great personal satisfaction from it while they were serving other people. And that satisfaction can come in the form of money. It can come in a million forms. But look at all these guys now. You know, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates have got all these rich people giving away half their money. And I'm sure a bunch of them would give all of it away. There's a great book about the guy that built the duty-free empire. And he gave like all his money away, you know, whatever, billions. It's not about the money. But obviously they live well. I'm not denying that, and I'm sure they enjoy the money, bought some nice cars here and there. But the reality is, whatever satisfaction you get from it, you have to love it, and it has to be good for the customer. Because if it ain't good for the customer, it ain't happening. So when I dreamed up my first business, the book superstore, and that was a pretty straightforward thing. I mean, I fell in love with retailing right after I fell in love with business. I decided that was one of the most powerful ways to make people's lives better, especially if you're in discount retailing. Because if I open a store and I drop the prices on a bunch of merchandise by 20%, that is like handing a check to everybody. And if you have a broad range of merchandise, and groceries and clothes and everything else, it's even broader. And actually, the company I was looking up to at that point was largely Kmart, which was an early stage and just beginning to do their big thing. And then later, you know, it's an old stick company now. So I fell in love with retailing, and I decided, after working for big retailers, I realized the advantage is really with the smaller retailer. Now that's not what you're going to read in the papers and everything, but the reality is retailing is about knowing your customer and being close to your customer. And if you really love and care about your customer and really go to incredibly extreme lengths to understand them and serve them, then the big guys have trouble competing with you. You have the advantages. And so working for a big retailer, I said, hey, you know, I can do this. And I learned a lot, and I actually advocate a lot of entrepreneurs go to work for the best big company in the industry you're interested in. Because if you want to run a hotel someday, man, you ought to put in 3 to 5 years with Marriott. You want to run a restaurant someday, you ought to put in 3 to 5 years with Chili's or McDonald's or, you know, whatever's the right thing. Obviously, Michael Dell didn't do that, and he seems to have done okay. But so I learned from big retailers, about half what you learn is like, oh, I'll never do that, and about half what you learn is, oh, that's a cool idea. I'm glad I learned that. So it's both good things and bad things. And then I realized, okay, I want to start my own retail chain. I don't know what kind. So as a startup entrepreneur, I've got to be looking about 20 years into the future. 15 to 20. Because anything you do or start up is going to take you 5 to 7, 9 years, right? Even Facebook, look at it. When did it go public? What was it, 5 years old, 6 years old? Even the things we think of as overnight successes are very rarely overnight. Now, Instagram blew out in like a year or something. But man, it's very rare. Amazon took a while. All of my companies took 5, 7, 9 years before they were real. So if you're going to build a company up and then either sell it or take it public, or hand it to your kids or whatever, if it's going to have any value, it can't be like you build it up in year 7 and it's cooking along, but in year 8 it's broke, you know? It has to have legs. It really has to in some ways be just kind of at the beginning, even when it's 7 years old. So you got to be thinking like 15 years or whatever. So I'm sitting there in the 1970s trying to foresee the 80s and the 90s. And the first thing I said, I'm going to start a retail chain. What type of retail store is going to be the hot kind of store? And there had been a new breakthrough technology then. And when I say technology now, I mean any better way of doing things. Sometimes we think of technology as only computers and all that. But Milton Friedman, my old econ teacher, used to talk about maybe the most impressive technology of the 20th century was the way that chickens were raised. Because if you study what Pilgrim's Pride and Tyson's and all those people did, they dramatically lowered the global cost of nutrition and protein, and got better food cheaper to gazillions of people. And he was always in awe of what that had done. The Hub airline system, what Federal Express does, those are new technologies, cable television. So the new technology in retailing was the invention of the superstore by a man named Charles Lazarus with a store called Toys R Us in the late 50s in Washington, D.C. And what he did is he said, I'm going to be a specialty retailer, just carry one category of merchandise, he picked toys and games. In that category, I'm going to, so I'm not going to be a general merchandise retailer like Walmart or Sears or Macy's. And in my category, I'm going to carry a huge selection and have low prices. That was the idea of the superstore. Well, today in a world full of superstores where there's Best Buy, the biggest superstore organization ever built is called Home Depot, Best Buy, Lowe's, Bed Bath & Beyond, Staples, Office Depot, Barnes & Noble, it seems, oh, that's a no-brainer. Well, ideas always seem like a no-brainer in retrospect. And actually, I say, if you have an idea and you tell your friends and they say, that's the greatest idea I've ever heard, I wish I'd thought of it, you probably don't have a good idea. You might, but the odds are against you. Most great ideas are laughed out of the room when they first come. Because they just don't jive with they're disruptive, you know? And so Lazarus is saying, big selection, low prices. Well, everybody said it'll never work. Why? Well, if you come to my econ class in the early 70s, said this idea. No, it won't work, because if you're going to carry a huge selection of goods, you have to finance that inventory, and you're going to have to charge higher prices. And those stores in America, there's one in sporting goods, there was some in records, they carried huge bookstores, huge selections, and they charged full price. They didn't discount anything because you got to finance the inventory. On the other hand, if you're going to discount stuff, a key tenet of discount retailing is you carry fewer items. And the most extreme case of that, anybody want to guess what's the highest volume retail store in America per store? Of all the big chains, one of them has a much higher sales per store than anybody else. Anybody want to guess who that is? Walmart. No, this company, Walmart runs at about 70 million. This guy's at 130. It's almost double Walmart. And they have lower prices.
Costco.
You got it. Costco. Congratulations. I'll buy you a shiner or something after. Anyhow, Costco. Costco runs the lowest margins in America. They carry very few items. They carry around 3,000 to 4,000 different items in a Costco store. The average Walmart carries like 100,000 items. So they're carrying like 50 times as many items and doing half the volume. Okay? Well, so the sales per item are incredible at Costco. Costco is going to carry 2 laptops. Walmart's going to carry 6. Best Buy's going to carry 40. If you're a discounter, you carry fewer. You cherry pick. You just carry the high velocity, high turnover items. So Lazarus' idea was nuts. Big selection and low prices in one store. Well, it wasn't nuts because people loved it and he took huge market shares. And within the toy business, he lifted the average sales per store dramatically. And people love that combination of low prices and a big selection. And I saw that technology, doing my research in the 70s, said, I want to run a superstore chain. I want to take Lazarus's idea and apply it to some category merchandise. So my next question is, what category merchandise? Well, basically most or all business and economics goes back to demographics. Who are the people? I looked at it in the 1970s. I'm a baby boomer. Baby boom, the biggest generation in U.S. history at that point, and still is, I guess, because the generation a little smaller since then, I think. But there's never been a generation that big. And I'm one of them, and clearly, if I want to be successful in the 80s and 90s, I need to be selling whatever the baby boom's buying. And you can make a case that all of my business ideas, except maybe my new one, the ones I've started, have been serving the baby boom. So I want to serve the baby boom. So what is the baby boom going to be buying? I'm sitting there in the 70s. The peak birth year for the baby boom was 1959, 60, 61. So the baby boom was in their teens, but there were older ones like me. I was in my 20s. You know, it's a big curve, big bell-shaped kind of thing. And so what about the baby boom? When you study any clump of population, any cluster like that, target demographic, there are two things I want to figure out about them. I want to know what's unique about that generation and what are the things that they're going to do that every other generation has done. So in other words, if you go down, there are certain things people do at certain ages, and those don't change much over time. Crime is done by people in their teens and 20s. Drugs are done by people in their teens and 20s. Voting is done by really, really old people, and not many in their young. People get married in their 20s and 30s. People move between cities in their late 20s. People buy their first car. People buy their first house. People go to college. You know, so one of the things, baby boom being teens and 20s, if we did anything at all like previous generations, we would go to college or not go to college, and then get out and live in an apartment, and then fall in love and get married and move to the suburbs and have kids and dogs and station wagons, later minivans. So there'd be this natural evolution. And so I saw that coming, and that's not that hard to see, and it's so important. And the other thing about demographics is you can place bets on it. Now, we don't know where the Dow Jones will be, you know, next week. We don't know who will be president in 4 years. We don't know if IU will stay on top of the basketball rankings this year. We know to the penny how many 65-year-olds will live in Hays County 40 years from now. Pretty much to the penny. It would take like an epidemic or something to ship that. So you can really, if you read the most important person you can read is a guy named Peter Drucker. And you read his work and he talks about demographics over and over and over again. He's the greatest management thinker who wasn't a practitioner, the greatest one who was in academia. Read his book, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. That's the only book I require my students to read. So I want to serve the baby boom, and I know they're going to age and go through this stuff. Then the other thing is what's unique about that generation. Now that's much trickier. First of all, the baby boom was the best educated generation in U.S. history. Far more of us finished high school, and dramatically more of us went to college. And so I thought we'd be lifelong learners, readers. I thought the baby boom would also be more oriented towards music and movies than previous generations. My parents' generation, I mean, my parents went to a movie once a year for somebody's birthday. You know, and I knew our baby boomers, we were all going out to all these strange French movies and all this jazz, you know. But I thought, well, maybe we will. Maybe we'll go 4 times a year anyway. And maybe, because we were the Woodstock generation, Led Zeppelin, the Stones, Beatles, all that, maybe we'll also keep buying music. Because historically, those are really things for young people. And that still is the huge chunk of the market. But so I thought those would happen. That would be different about us. But it's very tricky to forecast what is unique about the generation. An example would be your generation, video games. You know, if it's age-related, then you'll stop doing all that. When you're 60 years old, you have a closet full of old video games. If it's generation-related, then you're really into it, and when you're 60 years old, you'll have a $40,000 video game room in your house. I would bet on the latter. But it's tricky. When I got to Wall Street, first got out of college, picked up retail stocks as a part of my education process, self-education about retailing. And when I got there, I talked to all the other analysts who covered different industries besides retailing. And the common word, a common wisdom on Wall Street in 1973 was sell soft drink company stock and buy coffee company stock. Because the baby boom is going to move from the teens up to 20s, and they'll move from drinking soft drinks to drinking coffee, because adults drink coffee and kids drink soft drinks. Well, it turned out to be wrong. The baby boom continued to drink soft drinks and never moved to drinking coffee. American coffee drinkership, whatever you call it, went from like 75% of adults to 50% over a 20 or 30 year period. Just dropped like a rock. And the biggest coffee company called General Foods doesn't even exist anymore. It was buried inside some of the company, but they had a brand called Maxwell House, and they would have been the stock you want to buy. Whereas Coca-Cola, look it up, you know, the stock's like a rock. Now later they ran another thing. Nobody saw bottled water coming. And with the rise of juices and Gatorade and, you know, all the, and now 5-hour energy, which is, come on, that's just where Coca-Cola started, just stronger, right? You know, more convenient, faster. So Wall Street got it all wrong as far as what the generation was going to do. So that can be tricky. But when I did all that, I said, okay, if I'm going to start a superstore, given that demographic data, I want to be selling books, records, toys, sporting goods, auto parts, or home improvement. Those are the things that fall out of the analysis I just did. And actually, of all the big superstore categories, really the only one I missed then was the office supply thing, which is a little different twist. Or that was the big one. Any case, and I'm not afraid, I don't think you have to be a first mover. I sat on a panel once at the American Booksellers Convention talking about book selling, and it was about the rise of Amazon. And there were 29, 30 people on this huge panel with me up at the front of this big, you know, convention group thing. And it was quickly pointed out to me, Amazon was the 30th company to sell books online. Because these were the other 29 suckers that all been ahead of them and all blown the opportunity, you know, that weren't Jeff Bezos or whatever. But being first is really, it's not about being first, it's about being best. And if you can be first and best, do it. But that is so friggin' rare. The greatest example probably is Federal Express. And there, Fred Smith, who I consider the greatest living, active American entrepreneur, he in a class at Yale wrote a term paper, said we should have a way to jet around stuff and run it through a hub and get everything to people the next day. You know, he got a bad grade on the paper if you've read the whole story. And then he kind of convinced people to invest in his idea. The first investors lost all their money. It was a terrible nightmare. His own brother and sister, he'd invested their inheritance from their father when he died, and they sued him because they said, you're going to lose all our money on this crazy idea. And last year, he's still CEO of Federal Express. Last year they did $35 billion. He's like 65 years old. He's still at the helm. So unlike Gates, who's retired, and obviously Jobs no longer with us, and that guy is like, man, he is the real thing. And it's changed the world, right? The way things are done. And UPS, as our rival, had to, in a lot of ways, respond to him. Now it's a very even thing. They're two of the most amazing companies you would ever want to study. So, anyhow, well, that story maybe implies something about the importance of learning, or what I call doing your homework, of trying to become an expert on your industry and the field you're looking at. The more you know, the better off you are. So one of my key things about that curiosity, now it's not on the back of the card, I guess I need to start handing out 2 cards, is I get to a thing about how we learn. This guy works, I get to it. There's my catalog, there's 5 ways we learn, and entrepreneurial thinkers get good at all 5 of these. And these are just a matter of practice. This is not, anybody can do these things. The first way we learn I call study. And I've got to come up with a better word for it, but that's like, think of it for a minute as passive learning. Like to the extent that you're taking notes, which I urge you to do. I don't care how smart you are, all the great ideas will slip through your fingers unless you write them down, or whatever system, electronic, works for you. But it's a one-directional thing, right? Until we go into discussion or whatever. If you Google, if you Wikipedia, you read a book. I live in a library. I have 55,000 books in my house. Go to my Facebook page and you'll see pictures of me in my library. After I lost all my money, I had to buy an old Catholic school outside of Dripping Springs just to hold the books. I believe in study, watching documentaries on PBS, whatever it is. And that's critical, and that includes the classroom. But what I'd say is don't confuse the classroom with education. My first bookstore was next door to the second Whole Foods Market. And I became friends with John Mackey, the founder. And I served on his board for 5 years. When I met him, they were doing $10 million a year in sales out of one store. Last year, they did $11 billion. They're up to, starting last week, they're up to 342 stores, I think is the number. The company is worth $17 billion. It is worth more than Safeway or Kroger or any grocery store chain in America. It's the most valuable food retailer in America. It's just an incredible story. Well, John, people ask me where did he get his MBA, and I'm like, no, he's self-educated. He went to UT a few weeks or a semester, whatever, but he didn't have time to go to class. He was too busy learning because he lived in the library. And he's one of the best read people I've ever met. He's just a voracious reader. And it's not about business either. He's a guy who really pulls the big picture together. Thing is that when I say John Mackey's self-educated, or that he's a dropout, just like Michael Dell, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison at Oracle, Michael Dell, if I didn't name him, the reality is we are all self-educated. Because I am a believer in the classroom. I teach in the classroom. I got my bachelor's degree. I even sometimes think about going back and getting a master's or PhD or something. So I do believe in it, but don't confuse it with education. Most of the well-educated people on earth get 95% of their knowledge outside of the classroom. And you should be among them. But if you can take everything you learn in the classroom, that's only 5%, then you're multiplying it up. Study is really important. The other thing I said, think of it as passive. It can't be passive. You should be arguing with me in your head right now. You should be thinking what email you're going to send me that, oh, I don't think so. Or, you know, you read a book, whether it's underlining it or taking notes like I do or whatever. When I watch documentaries on a DVD, I'm always pausing them and making notes. And so it should be active. But that is an important way to learn. Second way we learn is through conversation. Most people learn most of what they know through talking to other people. When I have a business idea, I talk to every person on earth about it and get as much feedback and get the word out. I mean, so many people are afraid to show their idea. It's their own ego at work. I mean, do you think you have this perfect thing that everybody's going to want to steal? No, nobody gives a fuck about your idea. You know? Oh, your challenge is to get them to give a fuck about your idea. The other thing about conversation is, the thing I'd say about that is, it's about talking to everybody. So I flew into Calcutta, India to speak to the Entrepreneurs Club. The president of the chapter had he's like 38 years old, owned a steel mill. He had his driver pick me up at the airport. I learned a huge amount from the guy, the young guy who owns a steel mill. I learned about 3 times as much from his driver. Because when the guy was out of the car, I said, well, what's this guy like to work for? How long have you been working for him? And if you want to understand India and its future, one of their big challenges is they have to close the literacy gap between the men and the women if they're going to make efficient, productive use of their society. And because the women don't have nearly as high literacy as the men. So my question for these people was, is your little girl in school? Well, you ask a rich guy, is your little girl in school? You know what the answer is. The big question in my mind is the driver's little girl in school? Because that's what's going to determine whether India prospers long term or not, right? So you can learn from everybody. If you get on a plane next to me going to Europe or something and you think you're going to read a novel, you got another thing coming. Because I got questions for you and I got tablets, and I take notes. And so there's not a person on earth I can't learn something from. It's my challenge to figure out what it is. Nobody. So conversation next week. The third way, that usually get taught in schools, observation. Most of what you need to know, much of it is right in front of you. So my poor students, I've now taken, probably up to about 300 people of all different ages in our class. They have to go out to the big shopping mall and also Barton Creek Mall. We have several, but it's the biggest. And they go out and do assignments like, look at 100 people and see what kind of watches they're wearing. Look at 100 people and see how many have piercings. Look at 100 cars parked out behind Penny's and what's the mix between luxury cars and economy cars. Go out behind Nordstrom's. What's the mix there with luxury and economy cars? How many people are on a cell phone at any given time in the mall? Go look at the food court and count how much revenue each food court tenant does in a 30-minute period, and then explain to me why one did more than the other. If you go to any reasonably well-run supermarket, and we are blessed in this part of the world to have H-E-B here as a mainstream supermarket, not a specialty store like Whole Foods. Go to any reasonably well-run supermarket, even while it's closed, you ought to be able to go in there and 20 minutes later come out and tell me the average age, the average income, the average family size, and the ethnicity of the people that shop that store. Because these stores are really tuned to their markets. What you need to know is out there. and opening your eyes, getting in the habit of looking, every product you look at, how could you make this better? You know, how could you improve upon this? In a room like this, there's a fair amount going on in here. In a room like this, there's probably 60 opportunities to create a $100 million business. Every service you see, every time you go to the movie, every time you go to the bank, every time you go to the supermarket, how could this be done better? And what are the, Peter Drucker calls them the disconnects. One day I was at Chase Bank, well, I think was it called Chase yet then? You know, they've all merged and everything. And at lunch hour in Westlake Hills, Texas, and I'm like, oh, what an awful experience. You know, I'm here, it's noon, and there are other people waiting in line, and there's hardly any people, any tellers, because they're all up to lunch because it's noon. And we're in this huge thing that looks like a big marble room that, like, well, I know who's paying for this. That's my $15 overdraft fees, you know? And yeah, it's just awful. And if you talk to banks, I make speeches to bankers groups, oh, you can't find good workers. A bunch of 18-year-olds don't really need a job anyway in a place like Westlake Hills. There's no motivation, a sense of entitlement. Oh, it's awful, it's awful, awful. Okay, I leave that bank, 3 blocks away, I go into, it's a Randall's now, a supermarket. Not even #1 in the market, you know, kind of really slaughtered by HEB. But I go in, and it's a bunch of 18-year-olds at the cash register who are incredibly fast, incredibly efficient, don't make a single mistake on anything I ring up, and smile, right? That's a disconnect. Why, you know, what the fuck is going on here, you know? One other, this was a pretty recent, my mother was in her 90s, and I was up, I visit Indiana, my brother lives near there, he usually takes her to the doctor. He says, look, you're in town visiting her, it's your turn, you take her to the doctor. I meet with the doctor, and she'd been in the emergency room the week before, and I said, well, we want to figure out what's going wrong. And he says, well, we ought to give her this test and this test and this test. A month ago, where spent that money, and they didn't find anything or whatever. And I go in and say, doctor, so well, my brother says, you've just done all these tests, and it was you that did it. Say it that way, you know. But you know, and the doctor, oh, he looks up on the, oh, yes, we did do those tests. Oh, okay, we don't need to do those then. And I said, well, what about the nurse's notes when she was in the emergency room last week? Did you look at those? My brother had already seen them. He said, oh, no, we don't get those automatically. Now, the hospital's across the street from the doctor's office, and there's only 2 hospitals in town, you know, not rocket science. So, you know, so here, basically, my doctor knows nothing about my mother or her health. Issues that are really issues of life and death. Then she's fine. Go back to her apartment in the assisted living or whatever at that time. And I'm bored. Not too much to talk about. And I'm on my iPad and whatever, and I'm answering emails. And there I get an email from a buddy of mine I went to college with. I haven't heard from him in 30 years. He lives in South Africa, and his kids are in the marching band. And here's the kind of tuba they use, and whatever. Here's their favorite kind of running shoes. And I know more about people's underwear on the other side of the globe than my mom's doctor knows about her health across the street. That's a disconnect. That's like, what planet am I on? So you always got your eyes open and your ears open. I love iPod. I got one written into my car out there. But so many students go through life like this, and you're not going to hear anything. You're not going to see anything. My ideas in here, probably half of them come from overhearing conversations in restaurants, from eavesdropping. Because when you hear somebody say, well, why don't they do this? You know, or it drives me nuts, or this or that. That's an opportunity to make somebody's life better. The next way so this is critical, and it's overlooked in a lot. And I'm going to come back and tell you about a book that talks about some of these ideas. I'll come back with one more idea. I'll forget it, so I'll write it up here. 4th way we learn is through experimentation. Experience, call it. Trial and error. Fail, 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 and fail again. And once in a while you get something right, do it again. Otherwise, keep failing. You know, fail fast. Learn from your mistakes. Fix it fast. Critical. And that's one thing to the extent I've been involved in nonprofit organizations or UT Austin, they can't deal with that. In the meetings, it's like, what happens if that fails? We can't try that. It might not work. That's the whole idea. You know, it might work, it might not work.
So you have, in general, in the world of nonprofit and government, innovation is just stifled. In general, there are exceptions, but it's a dead end. And I urge you to get into the nonprofit world. But boy, trying to get it all to wake up. The fifth way we learn, and the one that gets left out the most, is thinking. People talk before they think, they act before they think. There's time for both. I mean, I got friends that are really curious and never do anything about it. Some of my friends at the University of Chicago and professors that curious about everything, they never act on it. Entrepreneurs got to be curious and they've got to act on it. So there is a time. But I tell you, if you do all of these things, and you do them all the time, because they are habits, they're things that once you get in the habit of doing, you cannot stop. If you do all those things, and then you stop, and then you go off by yourself. No cell phone, no email, no committees, no groups, no task forces, no nothing. By yourself, and process it all. Whatever way is good for you. I have whiteboards all over my house. I have tablets all over my house. Actually, for me, I have my best thinking when I'm back road driving through the Texas Hill Country, walk in the park, go for a swim. Whatever works for you, just process all this. If you do that for 2 hours by yourself, at the end of that 2 hours, you will be smarter than you were at the beginning of the 2 hours. Just by yourself in a room. But only if you do those things. And I said I'd come back, and then we'll go into discussion when it works for you. There's a book, there's a guy named Clayton Christensen. He's the innovation guru at Harvard Business School, real smart guy. He's all that disruption, all that. He's written a lot about that. He and some other guys have written a new book, other people. And they interviewed Michael Dell and Jeff Bezos and all these great breakthrough people and said, how did you come up with your ideas? And they really tried to figure it out. And they found a number of things. Let me see. They do observation, they do experimentation, they do networking, and they do questioning. If you read my book or go to my blog or something, you'll see that's all my life is about. But the one thing that they all do, that's the key thing, is the power of association. Now, my way of phrasing that is virtually all great ideas come from combining two things that everybody sees every day in a new way. It doesn't take three things, it doesn't take four things. Bookstop was simply the idea of the superstore that Toys R Us was out there doing, and the idea the world has bookstores. We had two big outfits called Beat Up and Waldo Books. They were doing $500,000 a year in sales. My company within a few years was averaging $3 million a store, changed the industry. The venture capitalists fired me, sold it to Barnes & Noble, and was there in the big bookstore business. And they did a great job of carrying it on. The thing is, most great ideas are just two things that are there all the time, and nobody's put them together. And that is the key finding in that book, which I urge you to read. It's a very cool book. So, I just looked up. See, I'm going to blab on here for 45, 50 minutes. So, if you have questions, we'll go to questions. If you don't ask questions, I'll just start right up again. And anybody, fire away. Whatever works for you. I'm at your mercy.
What's your newest business?
Oh, my newest business. So, they were in order the bookstore. Success. Thank you now. Take care. You grab a card if you didn't get one. And then I did the Hoovers. And that actually, I dreamed it up, turned it over to one of my college buddies. He made it a huge success. I was kind of along for the ride. I then did the company's first travel superstore, everything for the traveler, and put everything into it, and the airline stuff, paid commissions on airline tickets. And we did 3 times our first year revenue projection, but we couldn't survive the airline change, and I almost personally went bankrupt and had to sell the big house on Lake Austin. Jim, thanks for coming. You're welcome. Talk to you later. Now I want to make sure you get that book. Okay. Oh, great. That looks very cool. Thank you. So that was where I lost the money on the first 2, and then I did going to create the first chain of for-profit museums, and that was going to be across from the Outlet Mall here in San Marcos. A museum about the history of the American road, a big deal. And the real estate deal fell through. I raised $7 million from one investor. I needed another $6 million to get it open. And hit the recession in 2008, we had to put that one aside. It's still the most lucrative idea I ever had, for-profit museums. And now the new one, it's something I started inventing games when I was like 10 years old that I played with the neighborhood, and then in high school, and then in college, and then even after college. And my games were really simulations of different industries. Well, one was a presidential election simulation, but also run a movie studio, run a television network, run a retail chain, and they were based on my knowledge of the industries from all my reading, but they were really fun games, which is why I thought it was really interesting. The first thing I saw when I walked into this Bobcatopoly. So all those games were pretty heavy on calculations, like we play them in college, and they were realistic. They were both fun and realistic, and then I'd say, because it was all done with pocket calculators, I'd say, okay, everybody go to lunch. I'll figure out who won, and I'll tell you when you get back from lunch. Because it was all these calculations, because all the formulas. And so all those 40 intervening years, I've been saying, I should migrate those to the computer. I should make a PC game. Well, it was always in the list, and I always talked about it with my old buddies. And then, for another business idea I had, got one of these puppies, and I'm playing with the iPad. I have 530 apps on this thing. It's overflowing. I can't even update anymore because there's no space on it. And I realized, well, first of all, there's a whole lot of missing apps on here. There's all kinds of things that to me are obvious should be here that ain't there. And then I said, and one of them is games that are both fun and teach you about something. There's a world of educational games. I'm sure they're calling on Texas State today, saying, oh, you should buy our big simulation, or you should buy this or that. Most of those games are not a huge amount of fun. And then there's a whole world of fun games of all different types, which, like, I had my investing team together, kind of my board this weekend. We spent 3 full days, much of it playing games. How many of you have heard of a game called Settlers of Catan? How many of you have heard of a game called Ticket to Ride? I got to figure out the demographics on that. It sold over 2 million copies. Biggest selling game in the world, a board game. And it's about the railroad industry, but when you play it, you learn zero about the railroad industry. They didn't even bother to get the map right, kind of thing, right? So our thing is to create games that are really, at their heart, they're an evolution of a board game. So these are not video games, these are not first-person shooters, these are not role-playing games, these are competitive games where you have a strategy, and the name of the company is Strategic Games for the iPad, is Stratipad. And so you have strategy, you have some learning, and they're fun, but the key is that they will take a huge advantage of the features of this. So, an example, this just shows you lack of creativity, because pretty much every industry I go into, I soon conclude, oh, nobody's very creative in it. Even things like games and film and all that, not as creative as they could be. So I bought all the books about how to program games for the iPad. Not one of those books even mentions how would you use the camera or the audio. To use either the backward-facing camera or the front-facing camera, what resolution you want, whether you want video or still. Because I've got probably 15 photography apps that do that. That I can shoot a time-lapse video or, make it black and white or, all that jazz. This is an incredibly, incredibly powerful device. The game programmers are so trapped in their little boxed-in world of three-dimensional graphics and the physics of first-person shooters and all that jazz, they are not even thinking about using this stuff. So, if you say run a movie studio in one of the Stratipad games, first thing you'll do is you'll take your picture. And then when the results come out saying, oh, Vampire Housewives bombs at the box office, producer, head of Hoover Studios is depressed, well, it'll be my picture in a newspaper on the iPad, right? And maybe you'll make, in the TV or the movie game, you'll make a trailer that all your friends will have to watch. There's a lot of business implications and all that. It's a much more natural place for advertising than all those other games because our games are about business, a much more natural place for companies to show their brands. When we make a game that built in a hotel chain, it would be real logical that it be offered you by Hilton or free to members of the Hilton Club or the Marriott Club. But we're still at the very early stage. I raised $50,000. It's going to be one employee, everybody at Meet, and everybody else on contract. Hopefully have the first game out next fall. It's the first time I've gone into business, it's a true gold rush. All my other things kind of fit my model of everybody thought I was crazy, nobody was trying to do this. Well, last I looked, 60 days ago, it's probably higher now, there's 80 new games a day in the App Store. There's 111,000 games. 70% of everything for the iOS system, for the mobile, are games, and 75% of everything for the Android Google system are games. So it's a huge gold rush. Now, my
analysis so far, and I mean, yesterday I was looking at all the publicly held mobile game companies and all the private ones and getting all the data, because I reach out to my network. I'm sure all my friends know what I'm doing, and they are all emailing me, maybe 40 emails a day, articles they see and everything that will help me understand this. And I don't believe that the current pricing and business model of App Store games is sustainable. It just, right now, there's just a bunch of junk out there, a huge amount of junk, where you'll see, oh, this is it's free, or it's $1, it's 99 cents. It's a cool game, but it always crashes the second time you play it. And then you'll see 40 people all say the same thing. Well, the person that wrote the game has never looked back at the reviews, right? Just that somebody in India or whatever said, oh, I can make a game in a weekend and put it up, and I make $500 a month, from the App Store, I'm fine, And they are, or were, and they have no future, there's no brand there. And now you got guys like EA coming in where they've been selling their shit for $60 a copy, and all of a sudden, what do you mean $2.99? What happened here, I'm glad I'm not them, And so it's just going to be a mad free-for-all. We're going to make great stuff, make sure everybody hears about it, and build a brand over time that in a way creates a new niche or fills it. There's a number of people on Earth that have those things, and Android and everything else. We'll start with the iPad and go from there. It's just going to be a huge number of people. But there's all these attributes. The GPS, so say you're playing a game where you build an empire of businesses. You buy companies, Monopoly or whatever. So in one of our game ideas, you would then say you live in New York City and say this game's just marketed in New York City. You go and you take it, if you're going to buy Time Warner, you've got to take a picture of you in front of the Time Warner building. And the GPS knows where you were, so it can tell us whether you use Photoshop or not, right? And then your competitor says, oh no, I'll buy the New York Times. Bang. Somebody else says, I'll buy CBS. Or on the West Coast, I'll take Google, you take Facebook, right? So using all these cool things in here to make the game more fun. And the industry isn't doing that. Overall, it'll change. It'll change. There got to be people. I'm always thinking, if I'm thinking about something like this, it's just a hot, trending thing. There got to be a whole lot of other people thinking the same thing I am. In general, I mean, some of my 225 ideas have been on that list since I was 12, and nobody's still done it. Often it takes 20 or 30 years before anybody does anything, so usually not in a rush. Yes, sir.
Sorry, not trying to interrupt you.
No, that's
one
right.
thing that my mind's been going crazy since you said it was investing in cities. If you could elaborate a little bit more on that, like go long San Marcos.
Yes. What the idea is there, and this is a big idea to take a lot of capital. And all my ideas, I thought about creating a website where you pay $40 a year and you can look at all 200 ideas, because I'm not going to get them all done. So, okay, when I was born, my dad gave me a share of AT&T. That was a very big thing to do back in the 40s or 50s or 60s, and people probably still do today. I don't have any kids, so, but give the grandkid a share of stock, seed their college fund or whatever. It's really a symbolic thing that you believe in the future and you want the baby to begin engaged. And I know a lot of parents did that back then. Well, if I did give something to my friends' new babies and grandbabies, I believe in the stock market, but even more so, I would like to give them a piece of San Marcos. Or I'd like to give them a piece of the Upper East Side of New York, or maybe not. Or maybe a piece of India or China. There is no way to invest in geographies. You can buy a mutual fund that does Brazilian companies. You can buy a REIT, a real estate investment trust, that just does shopping centers or just does apartments, like the Simon Property Group. They own most of the malls in Austin. A wonderful outfit out of Indiana. You can buy malls that way, but you buy malls all over the U.S. You can't just say Eastern or Western, or it's harder. So the thing would be creating a securitized real estate and build a market structure where I could actually, I see you now, take care, email me. I could put $20 into San Marcos for the grandkids. You would have to create a whole system of how it worked. I mean, to the extent I thought about it, I'd probably partner with a local real estate person who really knew the market and had outstanding references as this really smart person and honest. And then I would have them manage the local investments, and they would only make money if the investors made money. I wouldn't have any kind of fees on top of the thing. And then somebody would go through, and I mean, if you're really serious about it, what you really want is raw land. Now there you have a carrying cost. You got to pay the taxes and all this other jazz, and if you're borrowing any money, you got to pay the interest. But if you really believe in the future of San Marcos 30 years out, like I do, then you just go buy the next piece of dirt, you buy pieces of dirt, right? On the other hand, maybe if you did own apartments or little strip shopping centers, you'd be getting income and it would cover the carrying costs. So that might be smarter. But the idea would be a diversified portfolio, and then it would be like a closed-end fund. I mean, it would go on forever, and anybody could buy in or sell out, and you wouldn't have to have 10,000 or 5 grand to participate. But it would require a new, you'd have to create the securities, you'd have to figure out the way to structure it, you'd have to figure out the taxation, but if it's structured as a REIT, then they're tax-free. You don't have double taxation under a real estate investment trust. And then you create I would create a new marketplace. It'd be like the New York Stock Exchange. It'd be it'd be the global real estate market. And then you would offer, just like they do with spiders and ETFs and all that, you would offer the most attractive ones. So there might not be any Burma securities. There might not be any Nicaragua securities. But I can assure you, I just got back from my first visit to Colombia, I can assure you there would be a Medellin, because that's one of the hottest cities in the world in terms of what it's going to do and its economic energy. It's just amazing what's going on in that town. You could buy Mexico, and something like LA, you could buy West LA, you could buy East LA, you could buy Orange County, and that's the idea. Sorry, so I can describe it. But that's a big one, a complex one. My gut tells me, if you pull that off, you're a billionaire. Michael Bloomberg is the mayor of New York. He's the second richest guy in New York. He has I hope I got all my zeros right. 200,000 customers paying $30,000 a year. Anyway, works out to $6 billion a year in cash flow. He bought out part owner Merrill Lynch to help them save themselves. They had funded him when he started. He owns the thing. There's no public stock. He had this idea. Unbelievable. So, no, I think it's a huge idea. You never know if they're going to work till you try them. And how you experiment and how you do all that. But I'm convinced, because I've mentioned it to a number of people. I've yet to anybody say that they wouldn't take a look at buying that security. Because most people I know say, I really believe in Florida, I really believe in Arizona. Or I don't, I guess you could short them too, right? I think New York, Massachusetts going down to 2, short them. Most of my libertarian friends would be short them all the north right now. Both coasts. Another question? Yes?
So would you mind talking a little bit about how you failed really bad and then what steps you took to become successful again?
Yeah, well, I'm still working on getting back to where I was financially. Still digging out of that hole. Take care now, bye-bye. The travel stores were a huge success with the customers. We won all kinds of awards. They were beautiful stores. Didn't anticipate the airlines doing away with commissions on airline tickets. And we did 3 times our expected revenue. Most of that we sold about 3 times as many airline tickets. We had luggage, books, maps, language classes. 10,000 people a year came to our classes. We opened 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. So we were revolutionizing the travel agency business as well as adding all the luggage and books. 2 stores and also 1 in Houston. I did really, really new ways of raising money. I actually had 600 investors at $10,000 each, which really takes working closely with the Texas State Securities Commission to even be allowed to do that. I gave public presentations and raised money from the public. It's very complex. Anyway, I raised $13 million and the stores were going nuts and the volume was there. We were heading towards profitability, but not there yet. The first store is profitable, the next 2 weren't. And then the airlines just stopped paying the airline commissions on the tickets. And that took about $350,000 a year out of our cash flow. I did everything in my power to try to figure out how to save the company. We started franchising, we started changing the business model a bit, all these things, but not only was it incredibly difficult to get to profitability, it was impossible to raise additional capital. And we needed additional capital because we were still in the burn rate phase where we were spending more money than we were taking in. We were losing money. So, although the losses were shrinking, and I just couldn't. I ended up, I took myself off the payroll and I borrowed against my house. The day home equity loans became legal in Texas, my big old house on Lake Austin, the boat and all that, I borrowed against it to the hilt, the maximum the bank would allow. And so I took $300,000 and put it immediately into the payroll account. So I went on a year where I had no income and my house payments were $9,000 a month. And sooner or later, so when Hoover sold for $117 million, I got $60,000, all of which I owed to other people. So I really, when my students ask me, how do you know when to sell? I say, go talk to some other teacher. I'm going to go down with that ship. I don't know. had to do it over again, you never have that chance. I don't think I'd do anything differently. No, the main thing, at the end of the road, all you've got is your reputation. And every night, you've got to look yourself in the mirror. And that's really all you got to look, you know? And and the way we raised the money was a very risky deal. I had a big law firm, wouldn't even deal with it, said, oh, if anything goes wrong, you'll be sued out the wazoo. We lost all $13 million of all those people's money, never had one person even make a phone call and threaten to sue us, because we had been so honest, and from the beginning said, this is a startup, there are no promises, and everybody, a lot of them have said to me, I would invest again in another deal. So, you know, that's key, your reputation, and especially these things, and sitting in the lead kind of like every business. And then, you know, as far as picking yourself up, yeah, my own feeling, because that comes up a lot, is anybody that tries to do anything bold is going to fail. There is no famous athlete in the world that hasn't lost a game, a big game, where like Tiger Woods lost like a few years, right? There's no movie star in the world that hasn't had just a disaster at the box office. There's no famous musician that hasn't had an album that was just a disaster. All those people, if you're going to do anything significant, get ready for significant failure, you know? And it ain't easy. I mean, it's human nature to mope. But it more comes down to, do you go home and cry for an hour, or a day, or a week, or a month, or a year, you know? And either get up or you don't. In my case, you know, I'm unemployable, and what company's going to have me, you know? So I got to go start another company, you know, or find some university wants to hire me. So, you know, but I love the startup process. I love the whole thing. And I've had 2 failures and 2 successes. Well, this one I got halfway up, but if you say it didn't work out. So I'm 50-50. So now, 5th business, I'll either end, after this one, I'll either be 600 or 400, you know. It sure beats never have tried at all. And actually I met a venture capitalist once. He said he'll never invest in an entrepreneur's second deal. Because all these people come out of their first one, obviously it's been a success, or they probably might not be doing a second one. Well, no, that's not true. Come out of the first one, it's been a success. They think they're geniuses, and they aren't. They're humans, you know. And I never put any emphasis on luck, because you can't count on it or control it. So in my head, I think luck is irrelevant and plays no role. You look at the facts from outside, things happen. Now, but the thing is, this guy said, no, I'll never invest in an entrepreneur's second deal, because they all think they're geniuses, and they usually fail in their second one. So I'll invest in a third one after they've been humbled. One of the hardest things in life to achieve and maintain and acquire is humility. And sometimes you get it the very expensive way through failure. When you've had a big success, or the very few that had 2 in a row, and I got a number of friends like that, it's very hard to tell them they're wrong on anything. Even if they're nice people and not arrogant, you know, you have that kind of track record. It's hard. So you kind of earn your humility, but then it's an incredibly powerful thing in many dimensions of life. Best answer I can give on failure. Somebody else? Come on, we've all got to go to eaters.
Yeah, we're going to get kicked out of here in 2 minutes, but we are planning on going to eat afterwards.
Sounds good to me. One's ready to eat.
Any other questions?
Come on, somebody. Pick something up, or I'll just start telling more stories. If I got 10 minutes, I'm going to use them. Right all the way down here through Hoover. Hide all that Wimberley traffic.
All right, if you're forced me to do it, I might as well be the only one benefited, not the only one that's curious. But that idea with investing in cities, have you ever thought about combining that with municipal bonds and all that, and like whole government privatizing the entire thing?
You know, no, I haven't thought about it, but that would add to the challenge, because anytime you deal with the government, that's to the challenge. That's the slowest moving part of our society, and try to get them to do something new and innovative. There are examples. Is it a suburb of Phoenix where they privatized the whole company, also the whole place. And there's a suburb of Toronto too where they're very aggressive.
And it was successful?
Yeah, at least it made 60 Minutes or whatever. We're like, man, I don't know, fire department, everything.
Because whenever you do that, like privatizing, there's less waste. It's all, when you make something for profit, and waste is cut, and that's the whole argument there?
Yeah, no, the thing is, it's competition, and it's just, you have an incentive to be efficient. So like at Hoover's, we were selling books, and we sold books to libraries, right? Hoover's was books originally, and then morphed into an internet company under my friend's leadership. And we went to all the libraries in America and said, well, you're buying this book from your wholesaler at full price, 20 bucks. We'll sell it to you directly at 15, just like we do, or 10, probably 12, just like we do bookstores. I mean, you're a library, we like libraries, and we think you should be in libraries. We'll say is, 40%, 12 bucks. Not one single library took us up on it, and well, why is it? Well, we have a contract with a wholesaler, and we give them all our business. Well, it's a cozy long-term relationship. The people at the wholesaler, I know them too, they were our customers too, they take the people who run the public library out to lunch every year, or the school library, and it's just the way it's done. And who's going to rock the boat? And nobody gets a bonus if they bought the book from us, right? Nobody who's a library, buying books for a library, got any, even pat on the back, let alone a bonus in their check, or being a more efficient book buyer. Well, when I take that exact same book and I take it to Barnes & Noble or Borders, back when it was Borders, I'll see my friend Mr. Borders, he lives in Austin tomorrow night. They were screwed up his company after he sold it. You go to Barnes & Noble and you show them the book, they're saying, well, that's the best price I can get on this. And can you get it to me faster? If I buy more, will you give me a break? Are you going to run advertising so this book will sell? I mean, yeah, the first thing is a cool book people are going to want to buy. But right behind that is what am I going to have to pay for it? And it isn't necessarily brutal or nasty, but it's a priority of theirs to get good value for their customers and for their company. The odds that the people that bought this system or this place got any kind of incentive if they found a way to do it more efficiently are low. Not zero, and there's some experimentation out there. But the odds are very low. Whoever is in charge of purchasing this deal would have gone home any happier that night if they gotten 10% less for the 150. So there's just no incentive. And where do prices come down? Some people say, like privatizing the voucher system for public schools. Oh, just the rich kids will have it. No, look at the auto industry. Where is all the money? All the money is a Honda, a Toyota, and a Nissan, and Kia. I just bought a Kia. The big action. Where's the big money at retailing? It's at Costco and at Sam's and at Walmart and at Target. It's not at Saks Fifth Avenue. It's not at Neiman Marcus. That's not where the profits in retailing are made. So no. Usually in a healthy industry, the action is with the masses. Actually, Apple's a little bit of an exception. It's just I was just looking at the 14 mini is out yet. That's what I was looking at when I sat down. I don't know if they're shipping yet. But then I saw the price again. I'm saying, how do they get by with this? And here I am looking to buy one. So I guess that's the answer. It's amazing. But maybe things will change, and they vary around the country. I mean, I've lived in 5 states, and in my own experiences, Texas is a much better run state than New York, Illinois, Missouri, or Indiana. Just things like voter registration and all that, they're just smoother. I'm sure it's not simple. How many of you are from Texas? How many of you are from Hays County or Williamson or Travis? So Dallas area? Houston area? San Antonio? Anybody out of state? Where?
I was born in LA.
LA, Where'd you grow up?
In Switzerland.
In where?
Switzerland.
Oh, cool. Where in Switzerland?
Right outside of Zurich.
Yeah, in Zurich. Then when I'll be going to Israel in December. It'll be my 43rd or 44th country. Hell-bent to see all the countries in the world, but I don't know if I'll get to them. I have about 120 to go. Go to Colombia. I'm really big on Mexico. A year ago, I took the bus from Austin to Mexico City. Mexico City is the most amazing city on earth. I'll never leave America, especially with 55,000 books. I can't move. But if I could get a gig where I could spend 6 to 9 months of the year in Mexico City, I would be there like that. It's the most underestimated. It's safe. It's got more museums than any city in the world. It's pulled ahead of Paris, London, and New York. It has wonderful food. It's dirt cheap. It's just heaven. Have any of you ever been to Mexico City? Yeah, you know it. And it's been through a lot. I've been there 4 times. It was very dangerous 10 years ago. But it's much safer. But that's one thing. That's also true of big companies. Seems to be true about everything. Reputation lags reality. Like Medellin, people are afraid to go to Colombia because of the drug wars. Well, they killed Pablo Escobar, the big dude, in 1993. So it's been 19 years since they got that guy. And it's been a long time since it was a dangerous city. And it's just a wonderful city. Beautiful weather, wonderful people, all this innovation, way ahead of the U.S. in so many ways. And now people are waking up. I met about 10, 15 people when I was there, Americans looking to move there, looking to buy your houses. So Mexico will be, and northern Mexico is dangerous, and it'll take a while for Mexico to get through its drug wars, just like it did Colombia. But even then, the reputation will lag the reality. Warren Buffett said, when everybody else is afraid, be greedy, and when everybody else is greedy, be afraid. So when the markets are hopping, and everybody says, wow, 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 he doesn't buy. And when everybody else is freaked out and selling, the bottom's dropping out of the market, he buys. And if I was doing a real estate deal, I'd buy San Marcos, I'd buy Austin, I'd also buy Monterey and Guadalajara and Mexico City. You know, long-term play. I want to hold those 10 years. I want to hold them. Well, thank you all for your time and being so kind and paying attention.